I was asked to talk about growing, about the growing dimensions of cybersecurity. And it's a kind of phenomenon that is growing all the time. Until I'll tell you what I think about it, it will be already bigger. So my definition will be obsolete. But we have to ask ourselves, how come we had no cyber in the prehistoric age, and we have today we are almost ruled by machines? It all started with the invention, of course, of computer. And what is more important is the transition to solid-state transistors. And we have something that we call Moore's law, which says that every year and a half, we can put twice the number of transistors on a certain area, which means we more or less multiple the capacity, the performance of our computer chips. Even half per one generation doesn't sound too much, but this had begun in 1960. So since then we had what is today, 50 years. It's more than 30 cycles of year and a half, and which means the capacity grew by more than 2 to the power of 30, which is a huge number. And it's still going like this. Every time there are people who say this is the end of it, it's going to stop. But until now, you can read here in Scientific American, it's still going up, and we don't see the end of it. And only yesterday Intel introduced the new chip of 7 nanometer, the size of one transistor, 7 nanometer. Don't have to tell you, which means something like 70 atoms of silicon. It's made of silicon. And still, it's not the end. Of course, it will end when we'll be at the area of one or few transistors. But the good news is that then we will use quantum computers, and it will be even worse in this sense. I mean, the growth will be even bigger. This is about computers. Now about cyber. Cyber really started. I'll give you examples from Israel, but if you look at it seriously, you see that more or less the same happened in Israel, at the USA, Russia, all over the world, more or less at the same time. In the 80s, it was the first time people started to think about hacking into computers, and it was done in intelligence communities. The reason was very simple, because people stopped storing information in huge physical files, like this huge room you see here of the FBI in 44, and started storing information in computers. And if you are an intelligence entity, your job is to get this information. You have to find a way to hack into computers and get this information. Another reason, very similar, is that communication, telephones, hubs, transferred from mechanical hubs to servers, to computer servers. And again, if you're an intelligence service, you have to find a way to hack into these servers. And these two started people, because of this. When I say people, I mean practitioners, almost no involvement of academy and university, and I'll go back to this point later on. People started thinking about how to hack into computers. But computers were not used only for storing information. Because of this Moore's law, because the physical size of computers shrinked to half the size, more or less, every year and a half. Because of this, computers became small enough to be put in defense platforms, in military platforms, like the example here of F-16 was the first aircraft ever who had, aircraft before F-16 had computers, but not really digital computers, analog computers. They were called computers, but it's not the same sense that we use today. But digital computers, F-16 was the first one which was built around digital computers, and then 10 years later, computers were small enough to be put in the bomb itself, in what we call smart bomb. We use the word smart whenever there is a computer chip inside. That's almost the contrary to the original sense. No people, it becomes smart. See, because of this phenomenon, I'll give you one example only. You see here the rate of smart bombs that were used in 91 in the first Gulf War by the USA, and then it was only 8% of the overall bombs dropped on Iraq. Then it grew 8 years later, it grew to 35, 2 years later to 56%. In the second war in Iraq, it was already 68%. Computers, I mean, what do you do at the end? You throw computers on the enemy. And today, no one is using anymore what we call GP, general purpose bombs and things like this. It's only in very rare occasions. And therefore, in the 90s, because of this computer technology development, in the 90s, people all over the world, especially in the USA, came with the idea that because platforms cannot really function effectively without computers inside, we have another way, actually a third way, in addition to the previous two, to a third kind of weapon that we can use in order to defend ourselves. The first, I mean, let's say we want to protect ourselves against an air attack. Until the 60s, the only thing we could do is firing some projectile, using kinetic energy, some physical entity to hit this aircraft. In the 60s, electronic warfare was introduced. We are not shooting anymore physical objects, but doing something electromagnetically. And then in the beginning of the 90s, people say, but okay, the aircraft is actually a cluster of computers. If we can put some malware there, some virus, we can eliminate or decrease the effectiveness of this platform by using these capabilities, and nowadays we call cyber technology. This, as you all know, this went very well with the predictions of Toffler, which divided the time into 3 ages. He called them waves, but this is don't want to spend time on this. The first one was the agricultural one. The second one was the industrial one, and the third one, what he called the age of information, or third wave of information, which predicted, actually it was quite, today with the hindsight, it was quite easy. He said, okay, we know that these computers are going to be more or less to double their capacity every year and a half. We may ask ourselves what will happen in every field of our life if we could put the stronger or more powerful computer chips. I was still an undergraduate student of physics in 1970 when he wrote the future shock and then the third wave, and I guess all of you heard about it, and people took it very lightly in a way. Futurists are always, some of the predictions come true, some of them doesn't come true, and skeptical people, and especially in the academia, take them, don't know how to eat this creature. Until today, it's not a very much established discipline. But there are many types of predictions. I mentioned this, but when I thought about it, I remember that when I was the head of the R&D Directorate of the Ministry of Defense, Professor Horn was the head chairman, I don't know how you call it, of the Interdisciplinary Center for Technology Analysis and focused here at Tel Aviv University. And I still remember the discussions as what is this really, how can we really focus or predict what will happen in the future? But Toffler, I don't have to say too much about focusing, but let you read this very short paragraph from a book, Power Shift, that he wrote in 1990, asking himself what will happen to business and politics when computers will have a certain performance. You can read it. He says that, he speaks here about using, in the paragraph afterwards, is about using computers for direct communications. He didn't use the word tweeting, but he describes something like this. You won't need anymore a party, because political parties were invented to mobilize the masses. If you can directly send your message to the masses, to millions of people in one tweet, you won't need anymore these tweeters. Business, money, and politics will merge in a way, and then people like Donald Trump, he says, may be a president of the United States of America 26 years before he was elected. 26 years. So I always read it again and again when I find myself not taking too seriously futuristic predictions. I have to remind myself that sometimes some analysis is different. But let me go back to cyber now. In the 90s, beginning of the 90s, there was something else which influenced everyone, and 91, 92, the internet became public. I mean, until that time, it was used only by very small, closed communities, like physicists and things like this, but the internet as we know it today became public in 92. And then everyone in the world, including here in Israel, we said to ourselves, oh, all these wonderful predictions of Toffler's that we didn't know how to treat them may come true because of the internet and because of the other things that I mentioned. And therefore, people all over the world started taking it more seriously. This was 92, I think, is the crucial year. I was here in Israel in charge of the R&D. And as a result of this awareness, I wrote a letter to the Prime Minister because we realized that if one will start using it as a weapon, it will not be limited only to military platforms, as I mentioned before, but may be really turn against any system which is controlled by computers, and almost every system will be eventually controlled by computers. So I wrote a letter to the Prime Minister, said one day everyone will be aware of it, not only very small groups of experts, and then Israel will be very vulnerable. I mean, you cannot use this technology against countries which are not computerized enough, but Israel is very much computerized, controlled almost any system, any critical infrastructure like power production, water supply, you name it, is controlled by computers, not manually, already in the beginning of, or by the end of the 90s. And therefore, one day everyone will be aware of it, we will be vulnerable, and as a result of it, the Israeli government established an arm. It was called the National Information Security Authority, with the task of protecting Israel's critical cyber infrastructure, which means almost every system. This we do for 15 years. Today, everyone in the world is talking about it, but we do it already for 15 years. The world more or less ignored it, besides very small groups. Those in intelligence and defense communities that were aware of it didn't have any interest in increasing the awareness of the world to this capability. They wanted to keep it for themselves. But it all changed after the attack in 2010 of the Iranian enrichment centrifuges. Suddenly, people realized that it's not really limited to what we called information security. Until that time, we didn't use the term cybersecurity, we used the term information security. First of all, because it's not only about information. At the end of the day, what happened in Natanz, in the Iranian facility, was a physical collapse of centrifuges. It's not, technically, if you go to computer science school and ask them, was it about information? Well, they will say, of course, there were computers there were bits, everything in the world is information. But this is not the sense people understand what information is. At the end of the day, the effect was physical. Centrifuges collapsed. Because someone did something to the computers that control this centrifuge. And the same can be done to passenger aircraft or trains or anything else. Second thing is that it was not connected at all, neither to the internet nor to any other net. The Iranian facility didn't have any, not even a defense secured net. Nothing. The computers there were not connected neither between themselves and not to the external world. No net at all. So you ask yourself, how come the malware found its way to these computers? It will not take you more than 60 seconds to raise at least 5 or 6 different possibilities. And people realize suddenly that it's not only about the internet. And third thing, it's not really about computers. I mean, you look here, you see here the previous, former President Ahmadinejad of Iran and the centrifuges. You don't see computers here. If you have good eyesight, you can see on top of the picture, you see boxes this side, which had computer chips inside that controlled the rotation of the centrifuges, and were called by everyone controllers, not computers. You open this box, you find a computer chip inside, and everything that can be done to computers can be done also to controllers. Every one of us has a computer in his pocket. We don't call it a computer. It's the smartphone. This is an image in the center of the refrigerator my wife bought 2 years ago. A Korean one, South Korean, of course. When you open the right door of the refrigerator, on the top you can see a black point. I zoomed it here to the right. It's written there, smart diagnostic. I asked my wife, what is smart diagnostic? And there is a picture of smartphone there. The seller told her that if there will be any malfunction with this refrigerator, which will never, of course, happen because this is a very good one. But if, in case there will be some malfunction, the only thing she has to do is to take care that her smartphone will not be more than 2 meters away from this point. The chip in the refrigerator will establish a Bluetooth connection between the refrigerator and the smartphone, like we do when we enter our cars, send a message to the maintenance company some 40 kilometers from our house, and she'll get back an SMS, a text message, telling them when the technician will come, and he will come with the right spare part, not only coming, looking what is the problem, and then coming in, with the right spare part, because the chip will tell him exactly what is wrong with this refrigerator. I have it for 2 years. Can tell you every morning, including this one, when I make myself copy, I open this right door, I look at this sign there, and I ask myself, what else is there that I don't know about? Me and my wife, we are not talking anymore in the kitchen, but we realized, because of this event in 2010, I was called by the Prime Minister, this is the current Prime Minister, in 2010, and he reminded me of the letter I sent 10 years before. I said, now this is the time. Everyone is aware of the potential, and Israel has a lot of enemies. We should expect a quantum jump in the threat, and please give us, I will appoint you to lead the task force, please give us a 5-year plan how to deal with this new threat, to be prepared for the future. And here comes the problem of prediction again. I told him, first of all, the Prime Minister asks you to deal with the cyber threats. You have to ask yourself, what is really a cyber threat? During those years, it changed all the time. What is cyber? Today, we don't use, in Israel, we say cyber, we don't add any word to it, like cybersecurity, cyber something. We say cyber. What is this? What is not cyber? So I'll give you my own definition. This is the 2017 definition, maybe different in a year from now. It's all about, as I said, it's all about computers at the end of the day, or computers and communication between computers. And therefore, like anything else, this technology has a bright side and a dark side, like the moon. And my definition today for cyber threat is, it's really, cyber threat is the dark side of the computer. We develop computers for the benefit of society. We make them faster, more powerful, smaller, cheaper, you name it. Usually, we ignore the fact that by this we create a dependence on these computers and communication between computers. And bad guys, and living in Israel, we understand that there are always bad guys somewhere. Bad guys may use this dependence, this weak point, not for the benefit of society, but against our society. So this immediately, and this was when the Prime Minister approached me, I told him this on the spot. I really cannot predict cyber threats 5 years from now. We wanted a 5-year plan. Because as I told you before, one generation is approximately 1 year. In computer, in hardware, it's 1.5 years. In software, it's even shorter. And when we speak about cybersecurity, it's more lean towards software than hardware. And no one in the world can, perhaps Toffler, but is not living anymore. No one in the world can really predict 5 generations ahead. It's like trying to predict something relevant to our life 100 years ahead. You don't know even where to start from. Until we finish the work, I told him, our report will be already obsolete. And this was the problem that we had to solve, and the basic solution was very simple. We will not try to guess what the threats will be and recommend to the government what measures should be taken against the threat. We will build what we call cyber ecosystem. Really, what we mean by this really is mainly human talent, people. And if we have the right people, they perhaps, we hope, they may know what to do 3 or 5 years from now when these unpredicted threats will emerge. We need to build the capacity and not really the answers, not the measures. I will not go into all these elements, but when we say ecosystem, we mean mainly those 3 main elements here. I'm more interested in the academy one. It sounds strange, but in 2010, there was not even one university in the world, not only in Israel, in which you could go and study for undergraduate studies cybersecurity. There was one research center of cybersecurity in Oxford, the only one in the world. Usually, we live in such an age in which many breakthrough ideas emerge from academy, and then we have to break our head how to translate these ideas into real life, sometimes to defense, sometimes in economy, sometimes. In cybersecurity, we didn't have something like this at all. It was developed by practitioners. Academy was out of the game. There were certain very limited areas which were taken seriously by academy, like encryption, something like this, but not the overall discipline. And we had to change this situation. I mean, because practitioners, when they have a problem, a basic problem, they don't spend time on solving it. They have a goal, they will find some way to bypass the obstacle to reach the goal, and they are not interested at all in solving basic problems. If you want to solve the basic problem, you have to go back to basic research. And in 2010, there was not almost, except from Oxford, we didn't find any basic research all over the world. Okay, so at the end, we changed the definition. I mean, at the end of the day, I took the mission and we changed the definition, not the original one, but the definition as was dictated in a way at the end by the Prime Minister was to do something that will position Israel among the 5 leading countries in cyberspace capabilities. This is the ecosystem. Which means building or rebuilding the whole ecosystem. I don't want to go into details. I'll tell you that it worked. In 2016, we have the numbers. Since our recommendations were accepted by the government, the growth was something like 400% in 5 years. Something like 10% of the global market of cyber security products and services globally this is the share of Israeli export. So, but our share is something like 10%. And in terms of investment, global investment in cyber R&D, 2016, it was something like 20% of the global investment. Most of the money, something like 90%, comes from abroad. I mean, every day you open the newspaper, you hear that Intel, IBM, Google, 2 days ago it was Alibaba, decided to open a research center, R&D center here in Israel, using the ecosystems that we build. And at the end of the day, we get something like 20% of the global R&D investment. I'll skip this. Okay. There's another, in 2014, I was called again to the Prime Minister, and he said, there is one problem you left aside. Actually, we discussed it in our report, and we left it because it was too complicated. And this is the tension between cybersecurity or security generally and cybersecurity and privacy. This was after the Snowden effect. which surface the problem. The more effective your security system is, you need more monitoring of the data flowing between the nodes. And the more monitoring you have, the risk of violating privacy becomes more significant. And this is a huge problem. And these two values, security on one hand and privacy or human rights on the other hand, no one would like to sacrifice one for the other. So you have to find a way to balance them. Balance usually in our life, we have many other examples in which we have to balance between conflicting values. We do it based on our experience. We try something, we fix it, we lower this, increase this. Here, we had to do something which we don't have yet any experience. We hope we will not have this experience forever. So we had to solve this problem, and then we came to the conclusion that you cannot really solve this problem without taking into consideration aspects that are not really technological, like trust. All of you know it, but people trust Google and Facebook more than they trust their own government. At least this is the case in Israel and also in the USA. You can argue with the logic of it, but this is a fact. You have to take it into consideration. People will tell you that in order to have a good security, one needs to share information, but no one likes to share information. This is psychology. So you want to solve a problem which looks like a technological problem, cybersecurity, and at the end you find yourself dealing with disciplines that are not really technological in the right sense, without taking into consideration legal problems, business considerations, social behavior, psychology of people, and many others. You cannot really understand the problem. You don't understand the problem, you don't know what technology to pursue. So I talked about 3 false dogmas of cyber. You have to add a fourth one, and this fourth one is that cyber issue is a technological discipline. It has also very important technological aspects. That's true. And that's why when we, and I'm now closing my presentation, when one of our recommendations to the government was to establish in every Israeli research university a cyber research center. The first one that was set up, also the biggest one, is at Tel Aviv University, and I wouldn't say also the best one because I run it, so you have to ask someone else. It is Interdisciplinary Cyber Research Center, and the word interdisciplinary is very important here. Very important here. We have 250 researchers. It's a large group. 250 researchers. 2/3 of them come from the technological disciplines like computer science, engineering, mathematics, and 1/3 from Faculty of Law, business management school, social sciences, you name it. Now to close the loop. Give you one example for a research that is funded by this Interdisciplinary Cyber Research Center, ICRC we call it. Perhaps you know the researcher here, the PI, which tells you something about interdisciplinarity. I mean, it's not only in the sense of social science and exact sciences, something like this. Even within the sciences, it took us some time to realize that something taken from quantum mechanics, in this case the quantum clustering technique, can be relevant to cybersecurity. How come? And this is a research that was proposed by David Horn. The idea is very simple. I mean, we have all these bits. We would like very much to identify what we call anomalies only by the behavior of the bits, without being forced to go one level down to the content, without decrypting the message. If we could do it, we could solve the problems that I mentioned before, not violating or hurting the privacy of people. If we could isolate malware from the bulge of normal, regular bits. And this is one subject that we fund. Thank you. I think that eventually we will have a separate department, okay, for cybersecurity. You have to do it. Academy, as you know, is a very conservative establishment. It was founded 1,000 years ago, and we still use the words faculty and rector and God knows what. But you have to do it gradually. We started with, here at Tel Aviv University, we started with a mutual program to engineering and computer science. We let every faculty at Tel Aviv University, every faculty have its first degree, BA or Bachelor of Science, normal first degree. You get a normal diploma, but you can do it in a track that is a cybersecurity track. You can be a lawyer specializing in cybersecurity and things like this. At the end, this is my belief, but perhaps the Professor Rose, the rector, will talk about it. At the end, we will have, I think, a separate department for this. But it will take time.
Any other questions?
Thank you.